Hi, everyone. My name's Shaina Luck. As David said, I'm based with CBC in Nova Scotia, in Halifax. I had no idea what I was agreeing to when David asked me to present this, because I've never been to Data-Driven before. Lovely to see you all. So when David asked me to do this, I said to him, David, do you understand the level that I'm working at here? Like, I don't know how to code. I don't know how to do any of that stuff. The kind of things that I'm working, the level that I'm working at is pivot tables. And David said, that's okay. We take all levels of skill here, and you can tell people how to do that. So that is what I'm going to do. I'm going to walk you through a project that we worked on in Atlantic Canada. So about a year ago, I work with the Atlantic Investigative Unit for CBC, small but mighty. There's about one reporter in each of the 4 Atlantic provinces, so I'm for Nova Scotia right now. And about a year ago, we decided that we wanted to look at the police complaints and misconduct process in Atlantic Canada, because it works differently across the country. Here in Toronto, when there's a complaint, when there's an allegation that a police officer has done something wrong, there's a public hearing, journalists can go to it, there are documents that can be looked up. None of that exists in Atlantic Canada. It all happens behind closed doors. We don't know when an officer is accused of doing something wrong. We don't know what the investigation is. We don't know if there's discipline. So we decided we would look into this because we just wanted to understand sort of what is going on here. So this was the tagline that we put on the first story that I did, just to kind of explain to the audience, this is what we are doing. Nova Scotians filed hundreds of complaints alleging police misconduct over the last decade. We didn't even know that hundreds number when we started out on this project. And the public never knew what happened to most of them until we found out. So this is sort of very bare bones stuff. I'm going to skip ahead. It did take us about a year because this information was not easy to come by. The police departments in some cases did not want us to have it. But to skip ahead to the end, some of what we found, the headline findings, 94% of the complaints that came from a regular citizen were dismissed by the police. They said there's no merit to this complaint. And we studied more than 10 years of complaints. It was actually more like 11 years of complaints. And over that time, we found 55 Nova Scotian police officers who were disciplined for misconduct more than once. So by their own departments, they were disciplined more than once. Again, these are things that were never known before in our province. The way that we found this was, I'm going to gloss over this part real fast, but it took us quite a few months of research to figure out exactly where does this data reside. So it lives in these very specific forms called Form 11s and Form 12s, not Form 13s, not Form 8s. And it took us more research to figure out what body holds this information and will they give it to us through FOI. So as it turns out, this information is held by a very small body, an arm of the provincial government. It's like 3 people in that office, and they were receptive to an FOI, which thank goodness that they were, because there were other FOIs that we filed on this project where police departments were not receptive and we had to go to court in order to get information. So I'm just going to open up what the raw data set looked like. Okay, can you see that? I'm going to make that a bit bigger. So this is what we got after 3 months from the Office of the Police Complaints Commissioner, that tiny little 3-person office. They compiled this information by hand from paper copies in their spare time. And so there were, by and large, they did a pretty good job of transcribing, but it's all human data entry, right? So it's messy. When I first got this spreadsheet back, I was very excited because I thought, oh, this is really data rich. There's a lot of information here. And then very quickly, in like 10 or 15 minutes, came back down to earth and realized, oh, it's not as easy to extract the kind of numbers that we want out of it. I'll walk you through what this is really quickly. So each row here stands for an officer, a complaint against one officer. So 1 officer, 2 officer, 3 officer, 4. There's also a column here where, this column, D, where the office assigned a unique officer ID. So they would not give us officer names with this. Again, unlike cities like Toronto and Edmonton, where officer names are more publicly available. So for privacy reasons, they said, we're going to assign a unique officer identifier number, which we were okay with in the end because it did allow us to go through the spreadsheet and see, are there officers who are repeat offenders here? Are they popping up more than once? And as I told you in the spoilers, actually there were. There's a column here as well called allegation. It looks kind of like jargon right now, but what that is the particular section of the Police Act code of conduct that the officer is accused of breaking. So in this case right here, this officer faced 4 counts of breaking different sections of the Police Act. In this case here, that officer faced 1 count. So this looked really good, like I said, on first blush, but then realized, oh, there are some problems here. Is anybody seeing them? Hands up? No? Val? Yeah, yep. They're definitely, they made it this way with all of this stuff up top. There were blank rows. In fact, there was a blank row that was hiding way down in the middle of the spreadsheet. I think it was like row 784 or something like that, which I had to do an entire analysis and then get that checked by someone else to realize everything is wrong. And we had to go through it twice to find that blank row. Another thing here, and the reason that it was so hard to find that blank row in the first place was because if you try to do your 4 corners, what you quickly come up against is this. So there's 3, what's going on here, right? Why is this row missing the file number and the department? So as it turns out, what that is this file here, 2 officers were accused on the same file. So you can see that the date of the allegation is the same, when it was resolved was the same. The only thing that's different is 2 officers. And so what the people who made this spreadsheet did was they assumed that, we would understand that this is the same file. And so that's why they left these 3 rows blank. So again, I was able to identify that because I'd spent like 3 months researching how are these forms constructed. I knew that there could be multiple officers accused on the same form. But if I hadn't known that, I would have had to go back to the people who built this thing and ask, just what is going on here? And in fact, there were many, many times when I had to go back to them and ask this question, like, your data is really dirty. And told me, for example, questions like that these were the only departments that were entered as codes on the list. So why in the department column are you entering things like Truro, the word Truro? They meant Truro Police Service, but someone in the data entry process got lazy and they entered something else. Another big problem with this data set that makes it dirty is the allegations are all crunched together in one cell in this case. So that's fine when it's just 1 count against an officer. But then when this officer faces 4 counts, and by the way, there was the maximum that an officer had faced in this was 9 counts of breaking the police code of conduct. But they were all strung together. And as many of us will know, Google Sheets or Excel really doesn't understand that this is 4 different counts. It recognizes that as one thing. So we couldn't count, how many allegations were there, what type of allegations were there. Just to go back to something that we learned the hard way. And the other thing I should tell you is that I am, from a mid-sized CBC station, Halifax. We have quite a few people in our office for a regional station, but there's not a lot of other people in our station who are doing data journalism. So I'm kind of working on my own and making some mistakes. And thankfully, we do belong to a network where I can reach out to people like Val, people like Tara Carmen in Vancouver, who I checked some of this stuff with. But, a lot of this is a solo adventure. So that's fun. So I learned, make absolutely sure you understand what everything means in your spreadsheet. So the blank officer file numbers and departments. Okay, I had to know in advance, what is that? One piece of information per cell. So those were lessons that we definitely learned the hard way. So taking a look at the cleaned data, this is what it looked like. Not perfect. Can I make it bigger again? Not perfect, but better. So all of the rows now have their proper file ID. And, in the end, I tried to figure out one way that actually really screwed me up is I tried to write a function to copy this down to the blank rows. And that didn't go well. And it actually caused some problems in my first analysis. So in the end, I did it manually. I copied, say, from row 4 here, 710P APD, just manually copied and pasted it. And because this spreadsheet is only 1,400 rows, that was possible. But it would have been a nightmare. I'm not sure how I would have handled it and cleaned that section if this had been like 100,000 rows. That's a problem for another day. I also used split text to break out the allegations by commas. So you can see here, now we have allegation 1 through, and I had to make 9 columns because there was one guy or girl who had a lot of allegations against them. But the point here is that, and just to go back to my list of things that I learned, simple tools can be really effective because once it was cleaned, all I did, going back to my clean data, all I did was pivot tables. Like I said, I don't know how to code. I'm not that advanced, but now I can see, and I also had to do some finding and replacing. I mentioned that they didn't always enter things like the department correctly. So now they're all nice and clean, the way that they said the majority of them would be, and I can see, how many officers are accused of offenses per department, Halifax being the biggest. So I failed to mention that these are municipal police officers. We're not talking about the RCMP here. I can also see, through pivot tables, things like how many accusations did individual officers face. So Officer 720 faced 13, and that was the most accusations against any one individual officer. So that was really interesting to us because, again, we had never known some of this stuff before. And at that stage where I had the pivot tables, then I was able to answer questions like 94% of the complaints from the public are being found to be dismissed. They're saying that they're not substantiated. And also, I was able to see, okay, how many officers are repeat offenders? 55. But I still wasn't ready to go with this because I was nervous about this, and I knew that the data was not really in a great shape when it came to me, and I was worried that, okay, what if I screwed up, and all that manual copying and pasting? So one more step, you would never go to air with words that an editor had not checked. And you shouldn't do that with data either. So I went to our colleague Nael Shaib. He's based in Montreal. He's a fantastic data editor. And I gave him the raw data set. And he used a totally different tool. So he used JavaScript. You can see, I'm going to try and expand his code here. There we go. Just some examples of what he did to double check everything that I did in pivot tables. And we put all of this analysis online. We put it on a link to the final article. We also put the raw data in, a link to the raw data in the final article, because we said, okay, this is the thrust of this story is that nobody's ever seen this stuff before. So let's show them. Let's show everyone what we did, how we arrived at this, and then if anyone has questions about our process, they can check it out for themselves. And we have actually had some good engagement from people who are interested in seeing the raw stuff. Not that many, most people are satisfied to read the main story, but there are a few people who are very interested in it. And I've even been told, oh, there are academics who study criminology who are very interested in downloading this stuff. So that it felt like a wonderful public service. So that is, I'm just going to go back to my list, everything that I learned in 4 easy steps. Make sure you know what everything means. 1 piece of information per cell. Simple tools are okay. Yes, that means I don't have to learn Python yet. And always have someone else check your work. So that is my presentation. Any questions? Thanks, guys. Yeah, so how many stories did we end up reporting with our findings? So there were quite a few. And it's actually worth saying that because this was an Atlantic-wide an Atlantic-wide project, this is still in the process of rolling out, because PEI is still working on we made the same requests in all of our provinces, and PEI is still working on their stuff. I just happened to be first out of the gate. So but in Nova Scotia, I think there were 4 or 5 that came out of this. So there was a day to introduce the project. There was a day where we explained sort of the major headline findings that I explained to you. There was another story. There was a storyline that came out about racial bias within, accusations of racial bias against police officers. There was a side storyline about how we had to go to court, basically, because the Halifax police did not want to give us this information through FOI. We had multiple FOIs at multiple agencies, and only the Halifax police were very adamant that they did not want to disclose. So there was a story about that, kind of explaining just what had to be done in order to compile this information. I may be forgetting some, but there was that. And then once this was done, my Newfoundland and Labrador colleagues, by the time I was finished this, Newfoundland and Labrador had their FOIs coming back, and they were like, oh, Shaina, you just did this thing in Nova Scotia. Can you help us with ours? Of course I can, because now I know. I've made all the mistakes, so you don't have to. So yeah, there was many stories in this series. Oh, any other questions? Or I'll hand the mic over.
Did you get to know who's the officer with the 13 counts?
Did I get to know the officer? There were some officers that we were able to double check, because based on other media reports, based on some of the timing of the accusations and the nature of the accusations, I was pretty sure that I knew who certain people were. In the end, we decided in our story not to name them because, for example, these 13 counts, these are accusations. They were not proven, and some of them were, and we did do stories about officers who were repeatedly disciplined. But for example, with the officer 7, whatever it was, we're not sure of the investigation and the status of that. So we didn't end up naming specific officers, and part of that was that this was a story about the system. We didn't want to get into people saying, oh, this officer's bad or that officer's bad. That's not really what it was about. we were questioning the way that the system works. Personnel changes, I don't know if that happened. I'd be kind of surprised if it did, in the sense that all of this information was coming out from their own investigations. So they already investigated and they made a ruling one way or another. I do know that the civilian body that oversees Halifax Police did have some questions and a report about how the police service handles freedom of information requests. And that was a direct result of our poking and prodding and asking for freedom of information requests. So we're expecting a staff report back in Halifax on that issue, and I'll be very interested to see what it says. Okay, thanks guys.